I sat back in my old wooden chair, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug of chamomile tea, the other absently flipping through a second-hand magazine I picked up from the thrift store down the block. Outside my apartment window, Minneapolis looked gray, quiet, and bitterly cold, the kind of late autumn day that presses into your bones. The radiator hissed softly behind me, but it couldn't quite cut through the draft creeping in from the windowsills. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and exhaled slowly. The phone rang. I blinked at the screen. Dad. My thumb hovered over the answer button longer than I'd care to admit. Eventually I tapped speaker, already bracing myself. Emily. His voice said, light and casual, like he was calling about milk. You don't need to come home for Thanksgiving this year. I didn't speak at first. The silence stretched between us, humming quietly through the line. I set the magazine aside, my fingers tightening slightly around the ceramic cup. Excuse me? I asked, my tone calm but already cold. We just think it's better if you stayed put this year, he continued. Mandy's been a bit on edge lately and well, we want to keep things peaceful. Peaceful. I felt that word hit me like ice water to the face. Mandy's on edge, I repeated slowly, letting the syllables sting. So you're telling me I'm not invited? Because my presence might disrupt her delicate balance. Dad sighed. The kind of sigh I knew all too well. The one that meant don't start, Emily. Just let it go. It's just one day, he said. You'll be fine. I stood up, the chair legs scraping sharply against the floor. One day, I echoed now louder. You say that after I've sent over $10,000 to that house this year? Just so you could keep the furnace running and Mandy could chase her podcast fantasy? Don't bring money into this, he snapped, his voice tightening. You brought me into this, I shot back. In January when you called me crying because the heat was off. I paid it. In March when Mom said the furnace sounded like it was dying, I covered the repairs. In September when Mandy drained her savings and you didn't want her to feel stressed, I sent money for heating oil. Me. There was nothing from his end but the hollow sound of breathing. We didn't ask you to, he finally muttered, defensive. No, I said. You didn't have to. Outside, snow had started falling. Soft, silent, indifferent. It coated the sidewalks like a memory that wouldn't melt. I looked out the window, jaw clenched. You say it's not personal, I said. But it is. It always has been. You made me the dependable one so you could ignore me. So you could keep Mandy comfortable. Another sigh. You're overreacting, he murmured. This is not the time to be difficult, Emily. We're just trying to support Mandy. She's going through a lot. And I haven't been? I laughed dryly, hollow. You know what, don't worry. You won't have to support her with my help anymore. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. The screen dimmed, then went black, leaving me alone with the silence. I sank down onto the bed, the mug now cooling in my hands. The room was quiet, too quiet. Not even the radiator had anything to say now. Outside, the snow fell heavier, and for the first time in years I felt completely, unmistakably separate. Not angry. Not shocked. Just done. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, my fingers resting on the edge of the keyboard. I didn't move. The screen blinked back at me, a spreadsheet open. One I had titled Family Help 2023. It was supposed to be a budgeting tool, a way to track how much I'd been sending back home. The idea was to remind myself it was all worth it. That helping them was a choice I could be proud of. But now each entry felt like a wound. January, $1,200. Emergency heating bill. March, $2,100. Furnace repair. June, $1,500. Covering Mom's out-of-pocket for dental surgery. September, $3,200. Heating oil for the winter, plus Mandy's overdraft. October, $2,000. A little extra to keep things steady. Total, $10,000. $10,000. I stared at the number for a while, wondering how it had grown so fast. It wasn't just money. It was grocery bills skipped. Late nights freelancing after work. Canceling my own weekend getaway to Duluth because they needed the help more. My stomach turned. I reached for my tea again, took a sip, and then clicked the tab labeled Emails. Dad. My eyes scanned messages I'd flagged over the past year. I could hear his voice in every line. I hate to ask, but the heating bill spiked hard this month. Emily, you're always so reliable. Just a small bridge until Mandy's next deposit clears. It's not that we expect you to help. It's just, no one else can. No one else can. That was the line. The one that always got me. Because if I didn't, who would? Not Mandy, she was always too anxious, too overwhelmed. Not my parents, they were already doing everything they could. So it was me. Always me. The strong one. The silent one. The invisible scaffolding holding up everyone else's dreams. I remembered last Christmas. I'd sent a surprise $500 gift card to help with presents for the kids. They didn't say thank you. Instead, Mandy posted a photo on Instagram holding up a new podcast mic set, captioned, "Manifesting my future one step at a time, sparkles." She'd used the money to buy it. I knew because I recognized the exact model from my Amazon history. It was the one I'd had on my own wish list for over a year. I had called Mom confused. She said, "Well, Mandy really needed a win. You understand, right?" Yeah. I always understood. I closed the laptop, stood up slowly and walked to the window. Snow was gathering along the windowsill now. Minneapolis was quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Below, a neighbor struggled to start her car, her breath visible in puffs of white mist. I watched her for a while, feeling like I was staring through the glass of my own life. I had always been proud of being responsible. The one who showed up, kept things together, never asked for anything in return. But standing there now, I realized something deeply unsettling. Maybe they liked it that way. Maybe the reason no one ever said thank you wasn't because they forgot. Maybe it was because they thought I owed it. That my success, my independence, made me their safety net. That I didn't have real problems. That I didn't get to be tired or overwhelmed or lonely. That I was a resource, not a daughter. The phone buzzed again on the counter. A new message from Dad. "I hope you're not still upset. You know we love you. We just need to prioritize Mandy's emotional recovery right now." I stared at the words. My hand shook, not with rage but with something heavier. Resignation. The kind that came not from one incident, but from 1,000 little moments stacked like bricks, forming a wall between me and the people who were supposed to know me best. No apology. No recognition of the money. Not even a thank you. Just another reminder. Mandy needs. You give. That's how it's always been. I opened the banking app on my phone and scrolled to the recurring payments section. One by one I canceled everything. Heating fund. Grocery allowance. Automatic monthly transfer. When the final confirmation came through, I whispered to myself, let them feel what silence really is. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and indifferent. I wasn't planning to go. Not at first. After that call and the string of unapologetic messages, I had every intention of spending Thanksgiving alone. Maybe order some takeout, binge some bad TV and pretend the day didn't matter. But then something shifted. Tuesday night, 2 days before Thanksgiving, I passed a bakery near Lyndale and saw a tray of pecan tarts in the window. My mother's favorite. Just looking at them sent a pang through my chest. Not for her. Not even for the past. For the part of me that still hoped they'd turn around, say they were sorry, admit they'd taken me for granted. I stood there a long time before walking in and buying 2 dozen. I showed up at the house without warning. No texts. No heads up. I just parked in the driveway around 3:45 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, carrying a white bakery box and the same fake optimism I'd worn every holiday since I moved out. The house looked the same as always. Worn shutters, yellowing siding, that one broken garden gnome by the porch that no one ever bothered to throw away. Nostalgia met me at the door, but so did something colder. When I stepped inside, the warmth of the oven hit me first. Then the silence. Mandy was the first to see me. She was standing in the dining room arranging silverware with surgical precision, her hair in a tight bun, her lips pressed into a line. Her eyes widened like I was a ghost. "Emily," she said, voice thin. I smiled, holding up the box. "I brought Mom's favorite." Her mouth opened, then closed. Behind her, I heard movement from the kitchen. My father walked in, holding a ladle mid-laugh with someone. When he saw me, the humor drained from his face like air from a balloon. "You're here," he said flatly. "Well, I didn't want to miss out on turkey and passive aggression," I replied. "It is a family tradition after all." He set the ladle down carefully. "Emily, this isn't a good time." Mandy clutched her wrist suddenly. Dad, my heart's racing again." "Oh, for God's sake," I muttered. "She's been fragile lately, Dad said, stepping protectively in front of her like I was a threat. I told you on the phone, she doesn't need additional stress. I set the box on the table harder than I intended. Stress? You think I showed up to attack her? I came with pies, not grenades. Mandy sat down at the head of the table, breathing theatrically. I didn't expect to have to navigate this today. I really needed peace. Mom emerged from the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked older than I remembered, maybe more tired. When she saw me, something flickered in her eyes. Not joy. Not even surprise. Just a quiet kind of calculation. Emily, she said, then glanced at Mandy, who was dabbing her eyes with a napkin like a woman in a perfume ad. This might not be the right year for a big reunion. I stared at her. I'm not a guest, Mom. I'm your daughter. I've sent more money to this house in the last 12 months than I've spent on myself. And now you're telling me I can't sit at my own family's table? A beat of silence. Dad looked down. Mom's mouth opened but nothing came out. Mandy sniffled. I looked around and saw only walls. You know what? I said, forcing myself to breathe through the burn in my throat. I'll make this easy for you. I turned toward the door. My hand was on the knob when Mandy's voice followed behind me, soft and slicing. You always make things about you, Emily. That was it. That was the line that cut deeper than anything else in that house ever could. I turned back around, trembling. I made it about me? Really? Every time you failed, I paid. Every time you cried, they turned away from me to comfort you. I canceled my vacations, my hobbies, my life to keep this house warm so you could have time to figure out yours. And now I show up, unannounced, yes, but with a goddamn pie, and you act like I'm a criminal crashing your princess party? Mandy didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. I laughed. One bitter, sharp bark of sound. Enjoy your peaceful dinner. I hope the silence tastes as good as the stuffing. Then I walked out. No one followed. Snow was falling again as I climbed into my car. This time I didn't feel cold. I felt awake. The next morning, I woke up to a stiff neck and a half-drunk glass of wine on the nightstand. I'd fallen asleep still wearing my coat, boots and all, curled up on the couch like I was guarding my own solitude. The taste of yesterday still lingered, burnt stuffing, hurt pride, and words I could never unsay. I rolled over and grabbed my phone. A few notifications blinked on the screen. One was from my old friend Josh, who now worked as a junior loan officer at a local bank. The message was short. Hey, just got flagged on a credit check tied to your name. Did you apply for a personal loan back in March? I sat up, suddenly wide awake. I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. No, I typed quickly. What's going on? A few minutes passed, then the phone rang. Josh's voice came through, low and careful. Okay, so I can't say much, privacy laws and all that, but a $12,000 loan was approved under your name earlier this year. You're listed as a co-signer and the primary borrower is A. Thomas Reynolds. I went completely still. Thomas Reynolds was my father. My chest tightened. That can't be right. I figured you didn't know, Josh said. It was filed electronically. Your name, social security number, address, all match. The payments have been coming in monthly, but there's still a significant balance. I thought you should know. I hung up in silence. I couldn't process it at first. Couldn't even feel it. My body just moved on autopilot. I pulled out my laptop and opened my documents. No emails. No calls. No consent. Just a ghost loan floating in my name. I stood pacing my living room in slow, jerky lines, rage building by the second. I opened the family group chat, the one I had muted months ago, and scrolled until I found a message from my mom sent in March. We've got it handled. Mandy's podcast is finally taking off. Thanks for the encouragement, Em. At the time I thought it was vague, harmless. Now I saw it for what it was. Cover. Misdirection. I opened Mandy's podcast Instagram page. There it was. On March 14th, a photo of a new home studio. Custom mic, acoustic panels, high-end computer setup. Captioned, all in. New season, new energy. Scope. Studio microphone, #manifesting, #self-made. I choked on a laugh. Self-made. I pressed call on my dad's number. It rang once, then straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. What would I say? Hey Dad, thanks for committing identity fraud to fund your favorite child's vanity project. I grabbed my coat, my keys and drove without thinking. just needing to move to outrun the shame crawling up my spine. How long had they planned it? When did they decide it was okay to put a loan under my name? Was it a group decision? Did Mandy even know? Or worse, did she ask for it? I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. My breath fogged the windshield, my thoughts spinning in sharp, uneven circles. I'd been more than generous. I'd carried them silently for years. Never complained, never demanded repayment. And this was how they repaid me. With forged documents and lies. The betrayal wasn't in the money. It wasn't even in the fraud. It was in the assumption. They assumed I'd never find out. That even if I did, I'd forgive them. That I'd do what I always did. Understand, adjust, absorb. That's what I was good for. That's who I was to them. A daughter, yes, but more importantly, a fallback plan. A walking safety net. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and let the silence fill the car. No music, no thoughts, no tears. Just clarity. If this was what family meant, if this was the price of loyalty, then maybe it was time I stopped paying. It took me exactly 13 minutes to cancel every financial connection I had to that house. I sat at my dining table, laptop open, snow falling just beyond the window, and moved from one tab to the next with ruthless precision. First the utility account. Gone. Then the automatic transfer set up for winter oil deliveries. Cancelled. The grocery stipend I'd been sending monthly, just in case, they were short, deactivated. My fingers moved steadily. My pulse did not. I called the oil company directly, half expecting to lose my nerve. The woman on the line was polite, chipper even. "Hi there, I'm calling to cancel a prepayment arrangement for deliveries to 17 Maple Ridge Lane," I said. "Sure, I can help with that," she replied. "Would you like to transfer the credit to a new address?" I paused. "No. I'd like it refunded if possible." "Of course. Can I ask why you're canceling?" There was a beat of silence. I could have lied. I could have said I was moving or switching providers or that the house had sold. But the truth sat so close to the surface, it spilled out before I could swallow it. "They don't deserve warmth this winter." The woman blinked audibly on the other end, then cleared her throat. "Understood." When the final confirmation email hit my inbox, I didn't feel relief. I felt nothing. Not yet. Not until I wrote the message. I opened a new email window and stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then I began typing, every keystroke sharper than the last. Subject: heat. To Mom, Dad. This will be the last message I send. Effective immediately, I've canceled all financial support tied to the house. That includes oil deliveries, grocery coverage, and miscellaneous monthly payments. I've also contacted the credit bureau and will be launching an investigation into the fraudulent loan taken out in my name this past spring. You should expect follow-up. I used to think being quiet made me kind. That sacrificing without acknowledgement made me stronger. I see now that silence only taught you how to take without asking. I hope the heat you used me to pay for kept you warm. But this winter you'll learn what my absence feels like, with every cold breath. Emily. I didn't reread it. I hit send, closed the laptop, and sat back. I didn't cry. I didn't pace or scream. I didn't do any of the things you're supposed to do when your heart breaks. Because mine had already broken. This was just cleanup. I stood, went to the bedroom closet, and pulled out a gift box I had wrapped the week prior. Long before the fight, the voicemail, the revelations. It had been labeled, "For Lily U December 25th. Inside was a check for $4,000. I'd planned to help my niece with her future school costs. College savings. A fresh start. Now I stared at the envelope like it belonged to someone else. Slowly I opened it, tore the check in half, then in half again until it was nothing but fluttering pieces on my kitchen counter. I didn't do it out of anger. Not even revenge. I did it because giving was supposed to be rooted in love, and I couldn't find any left. Not in them. Not in me. Just the outline of it, the faded echo of obligation. For so long I'd believed being the dependable one meant being the good one. That my value came from being useful. Helpful. Predictable. But when you're always the strong one, people forget to treat you like someone who can break. They forget that you're human. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a blanket over my shoulders, sipping tea as the radiator kicked on beside me. Outside, the snow had grown heavier, painting the world white and quiet. My phone lay face down on the table. I knew messages would come. Cold ones. Guilt-laced ones. Maybe even furious ones. But for now I wasn't answering. For the first time in my adult life I wasn't giving. I wasn't fixing. I wasn't showing up for a family that never showed up for me. I was letting them freeze. Came 2 days later. I was folding laundry in silence, the dryer humming faintly in the background, when I noticed the voicemail icon blinking on my phone. No missed call, just a message left in the middle of the night. I hesitated, then hit play. My father's voice filled the room, quiet and breathless, like he wasn't sure he should be speaking at all. "Emily, it's Dad." He paused. I heard rustling, maybe the creak of the back porch swing. I pictured him outside, avoiding the living room where Mandy was likely still playing the victim, where my mother was likely still nursing a headache born from guilt she couldn't name. I know you're upset. I just wanted to talk. Or try to." More silence. He cleared his throat. "You have to understand. This wasn't personal. We were just trying to keep the peace. Mandy's been through a lot this year. The panic attacks, the failed sponsorship, her self-esteem. It's all been fragile. Your mom and I, we made the best choices we could at the time. It wasn't about choosing her over you." I stared at the phone, my expression blank. The dryer beeped behind me. I didn't move. "I know you're angry about the money," he continued, "and I get it. You've done more than anyone. I mean it. You've always been solid, steady, someone we could count on." The irony made me laugh quietly. "But that loan? I never meant for it to be a big deal. I figured I'd pay it off quickly, keep it quiet, and honestly I thought maybe you wouldn't notice. Or that if you did you'd understand. You usually do." I sat down at the edge of the bed, the weight of the words pressing into me, not because they were surprising but because they were so painfully predictable. I'm not saying we handled things right. God knows we've made mistakes. But family forgives. That's what we do. We bend. We make room. His voice cracked a little. "Your mom hasn't slept much since Thanksgiving. She thinks you hate us. Mandy's been a mess. She keeps asking if you'll ever speak to her again." I bit my lip hard. He waited, as if expecting me to jump in, to fill the silence that spooled out through the line. But this wasn't a conversation. It was a monologue disguised as an olive branch. "I'm not asking for money, Emily. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. Just don't walk away. Not completely. Please." The message ended. I sat there in the quiet, letting the echo of his voice settle like dust. For a moment I almost felt it, the flicker of something warm, something that said maybe, just maybe, he meant it. That maybe he was finally seeing me not as a resource but as a person. A daughter. But then I remembered the silence when I stood in that dining room. The way no one spoke up for me. The way they all watched me walk out and let the door close behind me without a word. I remembered how Mandy clutched her chest like a stage actress and how my mother told me in a voice smooth as smoke, this might not be the year for a big reunion. I remembered the loan. The signatures I never wrote. The assumption that I would carry it all, because that's what I do. And I remembered the words that never came. Not from my father. Not in that voicemail. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Not once did he say, "You deserved better." That was the moment I knew. It wasn't too late for them to change. But it was too late for me to wait for them to. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally opened the drawer. The small one in the kitchen. The one where I kept all the things that didn't have a home. Tape, broken pens, extra batteries, and a white envelope I had tucked away weeks ago with a scribbled note on the front. For Lily, December 25th. I stared at it for a long time. It felt heavier than it should have, like the paper itself had absorbed everything I'd been holding back all these years. Love. Guilt. Hope. Obligation. Inside was a personal check, $4,000 made out to my niece. It was supposed to be my quiet contribution to her future. A small seed for college, for opportunity, for something better than what the adults around her had modeled. I had written it after a particularly hopeful week, when Mandy had posted about turning over a new leaf and my mother had called just to ask how I was doing. I had let that tiny shift fool me. I pulled the envelope out and sat down at the table, running my fingers along its edges. It wasn't Lily's fault. She was a child caught in a legacy of favoritism and excuses. But still, she was growing up in the house that taught her who mattered most. And if no one interrupted that lesson, she'd learn to expect love the same way her mother did. Loud, entitled, and always at someone else's expense. I tore the envelope open and stared at the check. Then I folded it once, twice, 3 times until the ink cracked. I wasn't going to send it. I wasn't going to write another one. Instead, I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began to write. Dear Lily, you're too young to understand this now, but one day you might wonder why your Aunt Emily isn't around anymore. Why she stopped visiting. Why her name doesn't come up during holidays, or if it does, why your mother rolls her eyes when it does. I want you to know it's not because I stopped loving you. It's because I finally started loving myself. There's a difference between helping and being used. Between peace and silence. And I spent a long time mistaking one for the other. I don't blame you for where you come from, but I do hope you grow up questioning what you're told about who owes what to whom. Especially when you're the one doing all the giving. Love, Emily. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But writing it felt like pulling a thorn out of my own skin. But necessary. That night, I made myself a proper dinner for the first time in weeks. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. I lit a candle. Sat at the table instead of the couch. Ate slowly. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel healed. But I felt steady. I realized I'd been waiting. For years. Waiting for them to notice how hard I tried, how much I gave. Waiting for them to pull me into the circle they always built around Mandy and say, you too. You belong here too. But they wouldn't. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because they never had to. Because I never demanded it. I'd always been the strong one. The responsible one. The easy daughter. I was the glue, and they never wondered what would happen if it peeled away. Till now. I reached into the drawer again and pulled out my laptop. A single tab was already open. Flights to Vermont. A quiet cabin I'd bookmarked a month ago for someday. I clicked confirm. 2 weeks. Pine trees. Silence of my own choosing. Let them sit in the cold. Let them spin their stories about how I'd changed. Let them learn that peace was never mine to give them. It was mine to keep. And this time I was keeping it. The cabin smelled like cedar and snow. I'd only been there a few hours, but it already felt more like home than the house I grew up in ever had. A fire crackled in the small stone hearth, casting a warm orange hue against the wooden walls. Outside, pine trees stood tall and dusted in white, like quiet witnesses to my reclamation. I stood on the porch with a mug of hot cider, wrapped in a thick wool sweater I had never allowed myself to buy before, because there's always something more important, I used to say. And there always was. Till now. My phone hadn't rung once since I left Minneapolis. No voicemails. No texts. No apologies. It was funny in a way. How quickly silence filled the space where obligation used to live. Inside, the radio played soft jazz, and I let it be the only sound between my thoughts. I had spent most of my adult life equating stillness with guilt, as if being at peace meant I was failing to do enough for someone else. But here, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a room finally cleared of noise. Like the truth had been aired out and nothing needed to be rearranged. They hadn't tried again. Not my mother. Not Mandy. Not even my father, whose voice had once cut through so much of my self-worth that hearing it now barely registered as a tremor. It wasn't surprising. Because the thing about people who take without asking is, they only knock when they know the door will open. This one didn't. I sat by the fire later that evening and pulled out my journal. Not the one I used for budgeting or lists or careful, curated reflections. This one was raw. Pages of messy handwriting, tear-stained corners, and all the things I'd been too afraid to say aloud. I wrote only one line. Let them miss me in the cold. I closed the book and set it beside the hearth, watching the flames flicker and dance. Somewhere out there, I imagined them sitting in that same old house. Maybe the heat had been turned back on. Maybe they figured out a new way to pay for it. Maybe they blamed me, called me selfish, dramatic. Let them. Let them rewrite the story into something that made them feel safe. That didn't challenge the image they had of the dependable daughter who never said no. The emotional workhorse who didn't ask to be loved back. But maybe, just maybe, there'd come a day when Lily, older now, would ask why Aunt Emily stopped visiting. And maybe someone would tell the truth. Or maybe she'd find the letter I'd written and tucked away. Either way, I was done writing chapters in a story where I wasn't allowed to have a voice. This was mine now. And if peace was lonely sometimes, at least it was honest. As the fire dimmed and snow began falling again outside, I felt no bitterness. No revenge. No need for them to feel what I had felt. I only hoped they'd finally understand the cost of making someone feel replaceable. Because here's what they never realized. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving them. I walked away because they never noticed when I was standing right there.